Oh, here it goes.
Listen to part of a university lecture on animal behavior by a professor of biology. We're looking at animal behavior this week, and let's turn now, class, to one of its most dramatic manifestations: animal mimicry. Organisms that are good to eat or that are attacked for other reasons often develop devices, through evolution of course, techniques and devices to protect themselves from their attackers in order to survive and in order to reproduce and pass their genes on to the next generation. And one of these techniques, one of these strategies, is to look like something else, to look like something that is not good to eat, or something that is otherwise of no interest to the predator. An organism that does this, that resembles something else, is called a mimic. And the thing that it has evolved to resemble is called the model, while the predator that it is trying to mislead is called the recipient, the one that receives the misleading image. Some mimics do this by adopting camouflage, which is a cryptic resemblance to something of no interest to its enemy, and by doing this, they become invisible. They are hidden. Many animals, insects, lizards, amphibians, mimic the abundant plant life in the habitat around them. I'm sure that you've seen green grasshoppers and brown moths that seem to be well hidden on grass stems and tree trunks when they're motionless. But the leaf-tailed gecko, a small lizard in Madagascar, is a master at this. It avoids its enemies by looking exactly like a cluster of old dead leaves. And there are various species of katydids, grasshopper-like insects that have managed to duplicate the appearance of leaves with startling accuracy. In all stages of growth, some species looking like fresh green leaves and others looking like old decaying leaves, complete with leaf veins, weathered edges, and mildew spots. These adaptations make these animals difficult or impossible for a predator to identify or even notice, and so these otherwise defenseless creatures are overlooked or passed by. Other organisms defend themselves directly with stings or bites, or with poisons or other noxious chemicals, and such organisms often assume bold, characteristic colors and markings, called warning coloration, that warns a predator, reminds it that this creature can inflict pain or discomfort, or that it tastes very bad. The bold orange and black pattern of the common monarch butterfly, or the black and yellow bands on a bumblebee are such warning colorations. And sometimes this warning coloration is so effective that another species, a species that doesn't have any of the protective devices of sting or poison or whatever, will adopt the same warning colors and pattern. This sort of mimicry is called Batesian mimicry. The name comes from the early zoologist H.W. Bates, who back in 1862 first suggested an explanation for the origins of mimicry based on Charles Darwin's new theory of natural selection. This was one of the earliest applications of Darwin's ideas to an unknown biological phenomenon. Now, viceroy butterflies taste good to many birds, but because they mimic the monarch butterfly's model's color pattern, because viceroy butterflies look like monarch butterflies, they are avoided, just like the monarch is. In the same way, many harmless fly species resemble the bumblebee model, and also in this way they avoid being eaten by the recipients, birds. So these are Bastian mimics. There are several conditions that must be fulfilled, though, for a Bastian mimic to be successful. The mimic must of course share the same general region and habitat as its model, but the mimic must also be less numerous than its model, which must be relatively abundant. That way, the odds are that the recipient predator will sample an unpalatable model first, which is very important for keeping the trick effective. A similar kind of mimicry is Mullerian mimicry, named after another early biologist. And in this sort of mimicry, both the model and the mimic are dangerous or taste bad. A very obvious example is the way that so many unrelated species of bees, wasps, and ants have assumed similar, bold, black and yellow, or black and orange banded patterns. By doing this, Mullerian mimics present a united image that predators soon learn to be weary of. There's also another aspect of mimicry that I'd like to mention too, and that's the mimicry used by predators. This is called aggressive mimicry, and it is used to conceal or misrepresent a predator until its prey comes near enough to capture. Many mantids, for example, are green or brown so that they blend in with their plant surroundings. But some tropical mantids are fantastically shaped and colored, like the beautiful orchid mantis, which resembles a petal of one of those tropical flowers, and it hides motionless next to one of these orchids until an insect comes within its reach. There are also several green-colored vine and grass snakes of various families, which lie invisible among the tangled vines and branches of the jungle until they suddenly lash out to grab their prey. Actually, there are an endless number of ingenious mimics in the natural world, and I recommend that you all try a Google Images search tonight for some more interesting examples of this fascinating behavior.
Guys. So, first thing, what type of organizational style that does that lecture have? What was it about?
About animals.
Biology.
But it was one specific thing that animals do. What is that?
Mimic.
That mimic. So it was about how animals mimic or mimicry. And what exactly does the professor say about mimicry? What like, because only explaining what mimicry is wouldn't take 6 minutes, right? So what does the professor mention about it?
The way that they are enacting predators and insects.
Right? Predators and prey, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You have, that's right, the ways in which animals do this. To be more specific, you have different types of mimicry, right? How many types did we see of mimicry?
3, I guess.
3, you're missing 1. 4. We had the first one, which was camouflage. The second one was I think it was Bayesian mimicry, right? Second. The third was
Memory mimics.
malaria mimicry. And the fourth, the last one,
Aggressive.
the aggressive mimicry. All right. And when you have classification, we were saying yesterday, you usually have types, what they are, so what they consist in, what animals do, and examples, right? So you probably heard a lot of names of animals that maybe you don't know. That's okay. The important thing is that you take notes on at least how you think they are pronounced and that you're organizing the information correctly, right? So that you have your boxes separated. So one box is going to be for camouflage. You have a little bit of what it's about in the example that we mentioned, right? Another box for Bayesian mimicry, same thing, an explanation, the examples, that's it. Then in the other one, right? So that's kind of the idea here. But let's see, let's answer the questions. First question says, why does the lecturer mention Charles Darwin?
C.
First one.
Okay, A, C,
A.
B.
B.
well, majority wins, let's go for B. I do agree, I do think it's B. Because remember, right? I don't know, like we were saying in the reading, for those of you who were in the reading section, applies here to the listening as well. Remember that first thing you have to know what the main topic is, right? Here we said it was about animal mimicry. So everything that is mentioned has to be related somehow to animal mimicry. The professor is not gonna start talking about the theory of evolution, right? When this is about mimicry. So I don't know. I don't think that A would be the right choice because again, this is not about the theory of evolution. This is not about the evolutionary theory. This is about mimicry. So if Darwin was mentioned there, it has to be because he is somehow related to mimicry. So in that case, we would have options B, C, and D, right? Now, option C, he explained mimicry for the first time, is false information. That's not correct. He didn't explain mimicry. Now, option D, he separated Bayesian and Mullerian mimicry. You know, this is why it's important to also understand the organization of the ideas, right? Because if you remember, only if you remember the order of ideas, then you know that like in the beginning, the professor starts with the introduction, defining mimicry, right? Then you have a few concepts defined, a few key terms, and then the professor starts classifying mimicry. And you have camouflage first, then you have Bayesian mimicry, then Mullerian, and then aggressive. Just by understanding the order, you will remember that Charles Darwin wasn't mentioned later in the lecture, right? He was mentioned in the beginning, I believe. So you know that it couldn't be related to Bayesian and Mullerian mimicry, right? It has to be option B. This theory was used to explain it, but we didn't explain. Now, question 2 says, what is the term used for an organism that is fooled by mimicry? What's the term used for this organism?
A.
B, the model?
A.
A, the recipient. What do you guys think? What is mimicry? Can anybody tell me?
Copy something.
Exactly, yes. Mimicry is when an animal, this is an animal. So mimicry is when this animal here, let's say animal A, mimics or copies or imitates something. So he's trying to copy like or resemble something. Now this something could be another animal, or it could be parts of their surrounding, right? It doesn't have to really be another animal. So something. So this first animal, animal A, is copying, is mimicking, is like imitating this other thing, which could be an animal or a thing, in order to what?
To defend.
Exactly. It could be to defend themselves, so the animal is gonna defend itself, or in aggressive mimicry, it was to actually catch prey, right? So not necessarily to defend themselves, but in order to fool, engañar, in order to fool another animal, right? Animal B. So fool means engañar, right? So animal A is trying to fool animal B by imitating something else. So the question here is, what is the term used for an organism, so the animal, that is fooled by mimicry? So for this animal, right? Out of these three things, okay, let's change this. We're gonna say A, B, and C. Right? B, and this is C. This animal is trying to fool this other animal, right? So out of these three, A, B, C, which one would you guys say is the model?
B.
B, right? The model, it looks like something that you're trying to copy. That's why you say, you know, like my role model, somebody that you try to copy, try to imitate. In this case, the model is obviously B. So we can eliminate that option. The device, I don't know if that was mentioned. Device, but anyways, it doesn't look, it sounds like if it existed, it sounds like something that the animal uses, right, in order to do this whole. The prey could be A, or it could be C, right? It depends. But the recipient, who do you think the recipient is? Totally has to be which option? A, B, or C?
C. A.
This animal is the recipient. Is this animal receiving something?
Yes.
What is this animal receiving? Animal A.
The model.
The model. The model? This animal is receiving the model? I don't know. The one that's receiving here, receiving the mimicry itself, receiving the act, is this animal, right? Animal C. The one that is being fooled, the one that is receiving the action, receiving the mimicry. Everything is going to him. He's the one that's going to be like watching this animal do that. He's receiving the action. He's the recipient of the action. This is the doer, right? This is the animal that is doing the action. This is the doer, the one that imitates, the one that actively does something. And this is the recipient, right? The one that receives. I don't know if that makes sense. But obviously, the way to answer this question is by paying attention and actually knowing the answer, right? What I'm doing here is just trying to be logical about the whole thing. But the first thing you should do is look at your notes, try to remember what you know about these words, about the question. But if you really don't, then try to think about it, right? Try to think what mimicry is, what animal is what, and maybe that can help you too, right? Because this animal, the one that is being pulled, is the one that is receiving the action. Everything is going. Right? So that's why the recipient would make more sense to me. Of course, there are many ways of approaching this, but I'm guessing it's A, right? The recipient. Is that okay? Does it make sense? All right. Next question says, why does the lecture mention katydids?
Option B.
Here's some little bumblebees, okay. Yes, do you guys agree? Does everyone agree?
D.
Option D, you say, because they look like lips?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
A.
Okay, they taste bad. And then somebody else has to say another option, because otherwise I don't know which one to vote.
A.
Okay. So we're gonna choose A. But before we do that, I want to give you guys some tips. The first one is what I already said yesterday, right? Usually the questions go in the same order as the information is given. So you have more chances of having question 3 being a question related to camouflage than to the others, right? Because the previous questions were the introduction. So if we were to, I mean, if we didn't know the answer and we were to just try to like see which one could be or is more likely to be, then this question is more likely gonna be about camouflage than the other, right? Because we're supposing that they go in order. That's one thing. Now, do you guys know what camouflage was? What's the difference between these four? What's camouflage? Who can tell? Camouflage is an animal that resembles or looks like what?
Like the environment.
Exactly. Parts of their environment. So camouflage is when the animal hides in its environment. So maybe under a rock, maybe like around the plants, maybe in the sea. That's camouflage, right? When the animal resembles parts of their environment. These are objects, right? Like leaves or trees or I don't know, like bushes or water. I don't know. What's Bayesian mimicry? What was the thing about Bayesian mimicry? When the animal resembles or looks like
A model, a pattern model.
sorry, Alejandra?
A model, a pattern model.
Are you saying another? Okay. Is that what you said? I couldn't understand what you said.
Like a pattern model.
Like a pattern, are you saying?
Uh-huh.
Like a pattern from a model. Is that what you're saying?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yes, it is related. I think Bayesian mimicry is when the animal looks like, or maybe has some patterns, like the model. But who is the model? In this case, the model are other animals that what?
Could be, could have poison, maybe.
I'm sorry, Walter. Can you say it louder?
Other animals that can have poison.
Exactly. That can cause damage, right? That is dangerous. Okay, they look like other animals that are dangerous. That was the idea. So the mimic, the original animal is not really dangerous. Okay, this animal can do anything. But in order to protect themselves from predators, what the animal does is he or she, well, the animal, it looks like another animal that is dangerous, right? That maybe stings or bites or does some damage to the other animals. So that way, when the predator comes and sees this animal, they're gonna think that the animal is dangerous, even though it's not, right? That's what Bayesian mimicry was all about. Looking like another animal that is dangerous. You are not dangerous, but you're gonna look like something that is. What's Mullerian mimicry?
The same colors.
Yes, it's an animal that has the same colors, the same patterns as what? I think in this case, it's also other animals. But the point here is that they present a united front, right? So they go like in groups. And well, I don't want to, let's just say the examples there, for example, was the bees, right? They go in groups, I think. And aggressive mimicry is when the animal, what's aggressive mimicry?
when have the same shape and color.
Same shape of color and color of what? They look like what?
Like a petal of a typical flower.
Then what? Sorry?
Mm, the lecture said the petal typical flowers, like a petal, like a typical flower.
Okay. Then petals of flowers. Okay. And they do this in order to catch prey, right? So their objective they hide because they want to look like they are not dangerous. So this is kind of the opposite of bait and mimicry. These animals that are predators, they want to look like they're not a threat to other animals. So that the other animals like go around them, or maybe they can even lay on them, and then they're caught. Right? That's why it's aggressive, because it's not about protecting themselves, but instead it's about catching their prey. So that is important, that you understand the types and that you understand what each one is about. And of course, you have to know the examples too. But let's say that you forget about the examples. If you know this, and you know that the questions go in order, then when they say, why does the lecture mention katydids? We were saying that it's more likely that it's about the first type, right? Camouflage. If it's about the first type, which option is more likely to be the one?
D.
Letter D.
Letter D, right? Because if we're saying that this is about camouflage and camouflage is looking like something from your environment, then katydids are mentioned here because they look like something from their environment. Of course, this isn't 100%. I mean, this is not going to be true 100% of the time. But what I'm telling you is, in case you don't know, right? In case you don't know the answer, you're not sure, then remember, most of the questions go in order. If you have an idea of what the order is and what the general ideas were, you can use that to kind of answer the question, right? In this case, option D is the one. Does anybody know what katydids are? They're like grasshoppers, the professor says, right? What are grasshoppers?
They are green and jump.
Yeah, that's
Like a frog.
green and jump. Actually, that's good. What's an animal that's an insect that is green and jumps?
Saltamontes.
Okay, saltamontes, right? And only just by remembering that they are green, then you know that if they are green, they probably look like leaves, right? That makes sense. So good, Alejandro, you're able to remember these details. I like that. And yes, so that was the tip, okay? Like for example, if you just follow the order, you can eliminate A and C, because taste bad and stink, what type of mimicry is that? Tasting bad and sting, those are related to Bayesian mimicry, right? Because they are trying to resemble animals that are dangerous. They taste bad, or that they are poisonous, or that can sting. And resemble bumblebees, I don't know which one it is. It's probably Mullerian, right? But let's see. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions? All right. The next question is, some moths and butterflies have large owl-like eye spots concealed under underwings, which they can suddenly display to a predator. Which kind of mimicry is this an example of?
C.
Okay, do you guys agree?
Yes.
Where mimicry? Okay, I don't know. If we follow the order, which one would it have to be?
A.
A, right? But let's see. Obviously, what the first thing you need to do is answer the question with what you know, right? So it's totally okay that you guys are saying C because this is what you know, what you remember, what you have in your notes. So in case you didn't know, then you will have to choose A, right? But if you know, you choose the one that you know. Now, question 5 says, which organism is presented as an example of malaria?
C.
Yes? You guys agree? More butterfly? You know what? This is interesting. Why? The previous question we said that that was an example of malaria mimicry, right? So usually you won't have more than one question about one big topic. We have 4 big topics. So it's very unlikely that you have more than one question for only one subtopic, because that would mean that you don't have questions for the others, right? Because you only have 6 questions here. So I don't think one of the two is incorrect. Right? I don't know which one. And second, I think you guys are guiding your response based on the previous question, right? Because the previous question was about butterflies being an example of what, and we said malaria mimicry. So if that is actually true, then this will have to be true too. So it's like, I don't know, it's something interesting. We will see. Okay, we will see. It's a detail, so nothing to do. Now, question 6 says, which would be the best title for this lecture?
Option B.
Animal
B.
creativity. Okay. Option A, animal behavior seems tempting because we already read that this was animal behavior, but I don't know. You're looking for the one that describes better mimicry, right? So what is mimicry? It is an animal behavior, but can we be more specific? Is it animals being creative? Is it animal deception? Is it animal traits? What do you guys think? What do you think?
C.
What is deception? What does that mean?
Fool.
Like fooling, right? Fooling something. Deception in Spanish would be like engañar, engaños, but probably deception, right? Because mimicry is fooling another animal. So animal deception. Okay, let's check. All right. So the first one's great. Darwin's theory was used to explain mimicry. Second one's good, the recipient. The third one's also good. They look like leaves. Now the fourth one wasn't actually malaria mimicry, it was Bayesian mimicry. I told you, right? Usually you don't have more than one question per subtopic. Now the bad thing is, although you can use the previous questions to help you answer the following ones, you can never go back. So once you have answered question 4, and then you go to question 5 and are like, oh, but this is about malaria mimicry, so the previous one couldn't be Mullerian. Unfortunately, you can go back and change it. So what's done is done. Question 5 was the orchid mantis. Now question 6 is okay. So you guys are missing the details, most of you. That is the case, then practice taking better notes. Your notes might be the problem. If your notes are organized and you have the examples where they are supposed to be in the correct box, it should be easier. What do you guys think? Do you have any questions? No questions? Everything clear? Okay, so let's do another one. I will use my Kush. I don't want to do science again. So. Okay, I'm gonna restart it because let's do something different.
Listen to part of a lecture in a world history class.
Most of you had lunch right before this class, didn't you? Well, I did too. I kept my lunch pretty simple. A sandwich, a cola, and some fruit. And I got to thinking how convenient food is for all of us. We don't have to catch our food or find it. Sometimes we don't even have to prepare it. We can just buy it. But things weren't always that way. In very ancient times, everyone got their food, well, most of their food, from hunting wild animals and gathering fruits and vegetables that grew naturally. As you probably noticed, hunting and gathering is not the main way most people get their food these days. Instead, we get almost everything we eat from grocery stores, right? And the food you find in the grocery store, or sometimes the ingredients in the food, originally come from farms. But how did farming start? What archaeologists have found is that the origins of agriculture are scattered across the globe. We see evidence of early farming all around the world, starting about 15,000 years ago during the Neolithic Age, the time period when humans first began to use tools, create art, that sort of thing, started to act more like modern humans. So, earlier in the Neolithic, we see signs of agriculture, but only the farming of plants. We see the first signs that plants were actually cultivated, deliberately grown and bred to be different from wild plants. We can tell that the plants were cultivated because they produced more food, better food for human populations, than their wild predecessors. The grain plants yielded more grain. The fruit trees grew bigger fruits, and the seeds more closely resembled the seeds of modern domestic plants. You see, even hunter-gatherers would sometimes care for wild plants, water a tree, or grow berry bushes. But real agriculture started when humans began to grow their own plants, deliberately breeding them to be different from wild ones. And in the early to mid-Neolithic, we see this kind of behavior popping up in a lot of different places. Cultivated rice in Central Asia, selectively bred squash in Mesoamerica, figs and grain in the Middle East. But that was just plants. You see, mainly plants. The other key part of human agriculture, large-scale farming of animals, didn't come till later. Oh, sure, there was some limited domestication earlier in the Neolithic, some taming of dogs, sheep, goats. But this was a very minor aspect of farming at first. As agriculture continued into the late Neolithic, we saw farm animals take center stage alongside plants. Humans started breeding the smaller animals, the dogs, sheep, goats, more than ever. And the animals became more different from wild animals than before. Sheep began to grow more wool for farmers' clothing. Goats were bred to give more milk and give to produce more meat. Farm dogs began to have the instinct to herd animals, not hunt them the way wild dogs would. Remember, this is one of the first signs of true agriculture. Selectively cultivating plants and selectively breeding animals. Animals began to become very important. Humans even began to develop pastoral communities, groups of people who all worked together to tend animals for food. With more people working together to manage farm animals, there was an especially noticeable rise in two types of animals that can be a lot of work: cows and pigs. Beef, pork, dairy. The stuff lots of farms all over the world still churn out today. This is where farming really came together, with pastoral communities. Farming as a whole started to take on the basic features of modern agriculture. People began to organize communities around farming and around systems that distributed the farmed food, gave the food to everyone in the community. These were small settlements at first, but soon, pastoral communities turned into something far bigger: agricultural civilization, based on the farming of both animals and plants, started happening on a large scale. We started to see lots of states with governments and modern social organization based on agricultural food production. There were rulers who made the laws about how and where the food was grown and how it was distributed. There were various specialists to grow food, store food, prepare food, manage animals or plants, make farming tools, build roads and buildings, and so on. People finally began organizing into complex societies like the ones we have today.
Guys, interesting. This one was shorter, but I think the professor was speaking faster, right? So at the end of the day, maybe it was the same length. But let's see. Let's answer the questions. We don't have much time. So the first question is, what is the main focus of the lecture? We have a main idea type of question. What do you guys think?
Option, the third
3.
option.
Yes, option 3.
Great, totally. Because it is in a list of the plants and animals. It wasn't like, so these are the plants and animals, and then start listing. No. They do talk about historical changes in the eating habits of humans, but that was just the introduction, right? The professor's way of introducing the students to the topic. And they didn't compare and contrast anything, so totally. All right, next question. All right, inference question. It says, what can be inferred about the relationship between agriculture and hunting and gathering? What do you think?
Third one.
Hunting and gathering does not provide that one? What about the rest?
I
The
think the
third.
second one.
Second, Alejandro, you said?
The third.
Third. I mean, I think the third is a fact, right? I don't know. Since the third is the most voted one, we're gonna go for the third, but let's see. It's the second. So the professor like basically says that shows the evolution, right, of food sources. So in the beginning of civilization, hunting and gathering was something very relevant, right? It was the majority of food came from hunting and gathering in the beginning. But then as civilizations started to grow, society started to develop, agriculture took over, right? So we can infer that agriculture, that is what is mostly done now. So most people don't have to hunt and gather, they say, right, in the beginning, right now, as they did in the past. So you have everything that you eat, everything or the ingredients in the food that you eat, it comes from agriculture. So that means that agriculture has more relevance to modern food sources than does hunting, right? Everything was about that. The evolution from hunting and gathering in the beginning of times until now, agriculture. So we know that right now our modern food sources come from agriculture and they don't come from hunting and gathering anymore. Right? So that's what we can infer. Is that okay? Because option C honestly seems like it's the same, right? Hunting and gathering does not provide as much food, but it's more about the way what it tries to show, right? When they say hunting and gathering does not provide as much food, what I'm imagining is like agriculture and hunting and gathering. Like if you spend the same resources, the same time, the same effort, you put out the same work, then what option C is saying is that agriculture produces more, right? But that wasn't really the deal. That wasn't the main focus of the lecture, right? It was about how people switched from hunting and gathering to agriculture. Water and food sources rely on agriculture. It isn't really about, this is, I don't know, the way that I see it, this is more about production, right? Production levels. Agriculture produces more than hunting and gathering. But let's move on. Next question says, according to the professor, what's true about the domestication of animals? Oh yeah, what do you think?
Three and four.
Or
I don't know, we're gonna go for 3 and 4. An increase in pigs and cows. I don't know if that was mentioned. Like they changed the way that pigs and cows are used, but I don't know if there was an increase in pigs and cows population. And it's definitely not the reason why farming tools were made, right? Roads and buildings. They don't say anything about that. I mean, they're not, that's not related. So yes, totally, 3 and 4. Because dogs, sheep, and goats were used the most, and they were more useful for farming purposes. Right? Maybe like, for example, the dogs started, instead of hunting, their instinct of directing grew more. So now, according to the lecture, what is true about ancient pastoral communities? Guys?
The second one.
yes,
All right.
Second.
That's basically the point of pastoral communities. All right, next question. Let's listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question. Listen.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
What archaeologists have found is that the origins of agriculture are scattered across the globe.
What is the professor implying about the way agriculture began?
First one. Teacher, you're on mute.
Sorry, so first one you said? Archaeologists have marked?
The fourth, the last one.
Okay. What do you think? The rest? What do you think? The fourth? We'll see, because I don't know if a world map is. The first efforts of farming happen in many different parts. And finally, we don't have much time. Let's go to the next. So it's another Listen again. Let's see.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
There were various specialists to grow food, store food, prepare food, manage animals or plants, make farming tools, build roads and buildings, and so on. People finally began organizing into complex societies like the ones we have today.
Why does the professor say this?
People finally began organizing into complex societies like the ones we have today.
The first one.
Okay.
Walter, you said 3. He is emphasizing the first.
Yes.
We agree. So he wants to demonstrate modern civilization is the end result. Yeah, right, because he makes this comparison of how like societies were in the past, how societies are now. And he's kind of showing or implying that part of the reason why we are so complex and developed now is because of agriculture, right? Because it helped in so many ways. I guess it's so. What do you all think? Is this clear? Is it okay? Do you have any questions? Let me know now what questions you have, if everything's clear. Listening, TOEFL listening, how do you feel about it? Is everything okay? Everything clear?
I have a question, teacher.
Yes.
Yes.
In the listening part, I didn't remember that if we have the option to listen again, the lecture at the same time that we answer.
No. Only in this type of questions. Only in the questions where they require you to listen again. So these questions where they ask you what the professor means or what the professor implies, they will play part of the lecture. But you cannot choose in which questions to listen to the parts of the lecture, right? Normally, you just listen to the lecture or the conversation all at once. And then after you're done listening, the timer starts running and then you get the questions one by one. You cannot go back, you cannot skip questions, and you cannot listen again.
Okay.
Any other question?
Yes, I have one more. It's just six questions per lecture, that's right?
Questions per lecture and 5 per conversation.
Okay. And how much time we have to answer that?
Depending on the number of tasks you have, if you get 5 tasks, then you get 41 minutes. And if you get 7, you get 57 minutes. So to summarize it, you get the timer for everything. You need to organize it yourself. Normally, you shouldn't be spending more than 40 seconds per question. So that could be around 8 minutes per lecture and 7 minutes or maybe less for the conversation. Any other question? Guys, and please don't forget today's survey, and I'll be seeing you all next week. Have a great night and a great weekend.
See you, teacher.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
you.
teacher.
Goodbye, teacher.
Bye.